Welcome to the Eat Your Content podcast, your home for all things food and pop culture. I am your host, Rich Herrera. Just a reminder to follow me on socials, TikTok, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, YouTube, at Rich Herrera and at Eat Your Content. And a few programming reminders. We are recapping all 10 episodes of The Bear. We're doing episodes 4 through 6 today. So make sure to like, follow, and subscribe wherever you get your podcasts. You'll know when the next recaps will be coming out. Again, want to welcome my guest co-host while we're doing this recap, host of the What Was That Like podcast, Mr. Scott Johnson. Scott, welcome back to the pod. Glad to have you
Thanks.
back again.
Thank you, Rich. I'm happy to be back.
Awesome. So where are we, do you think, we're halfway through the season of The Bear. Where are you right now in your feelings about the show?
I have mixed feelings, and which I didn't expect. So. I didn't expect that, but yeah, we'll be talking about some of that in some of the episodes that we're discussing in this time. But yeah, different people are giving me different vibes.
Yeah.
You know, I'm getting well, yeah, let's just get into it because we'll go into all the specifics, I'm sure.
Yeah, we'll dive right in.
What do you think so far?
Two just okay episodes and one really great episode. And I think when we talk about them, we'll explain our feelings as to why. But yeah, I'm the same way. I'm getting mixed feelings about it. I'm kind of like, man, I don't know. This doesn't seem to be the same show as the first two seasons. And you know, when you start off as hot as The Bear in seasons 1 and 2, like it's difficult to continue that momentum. Almost like the metaphor of the Michelin star, right? It's like once you get it,
exactly,
it's maintaining to keep that star that is the most difficult. So let's get right into it. So episode 4 is called Violets, directed and written by Chris Storer. After some really intense episodes 2 and 3 that were really a lot of yelling back and forth, a lot of intensity in the kitchen, I would say episodes 4 and 5, well, all 3 of these really, dare I say, is kind of a laid back, leisurely kind of episode. What did you think?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I thought, well, where episode 4 started out with Carm and Claire having that conversation, and I mean, talk about low key. It just seemed very real, you know, their discussion, not sure what day of the week it is. I've had that feeling before. And, you know, it's difficult to turn off that work mindset, you know, when it's your day off. And when Claire was talking about the pain of it hurts so bad that it doesn't hurt at all, that's another thing.
Line.
Yeah. You know, if you accidentally cut yourself with a knife, if the knife is really sharp, in the beginning you don't even feel it, right? And then it kicks in. So yeah, I thought that opening conversation kind of laid the groundwork for this, you know, for this episode. Although there was a little bit of tension, you know, there's a little bit of anxiety at certain scenes here, but I enjoyed that though.
Yeah, that beginning conversation was so intimate and so vulnerable. I almost felt like a little weird. I was eavesdropping on a conversation I shouldn't be listening to, right?
Yeah, you're a voyeur.
Yeah, like again, that claustrophobic feel of this season in particular. But yeah, that line you mentioned, you know, when she woke up, she couldn't stop laughing. Why? I don't think it hurt yet. I mean, just metaphorically about that line is so deep and has so many layers. And there's a lot to unpack, you know, just in that line about working through things like grief. Like, you know, you're not hurting. You don't feel it yet. And then when it does hit you, it's like this wave of emotion and this wave of grief that you have to process through. And so I was like, man, we're starting on the deep end of the pool in this episode. Yeah. And then we transition to Marcus at his house, and they're moving all the stuff out of the house, and he turns the respirator. And talk about grief. And then he turns the respirator on, and in that beeping sound, and he almost seems relaxed hearing that beeping sound of the respirator, as if his mom is symbolically still there, you know, listening to that. What did you think of that particular scene?
I thought that was so creative that someone, you know, who the writer of this script could get into Marcus's head so much that they know he's going to be more comfortable hearing that beeping because that's what he heard that whole time when he was with his mom and when she was still alive. And I mean, it's like an audio security blanket for him. Sort of.
I mean, Marcus is just like the biggest, most sensitive like teddy bear of this show. And
Mm-hmm.
I just when I saw that scene, I just wanted to reach through the TV and kind of give him a big old hug and
Yeah.
like, man, just you'll get through it. Like, wow, it was really really powerful. Sid hasn't signed her partnership agreement. What do you think that's about? I think it's about trust issues. I think it's been a month, right? I think she still has some trust issues with Carmi and the Brzado family in general.
I agree. I agree. She's worrying me a little bit, you know. I mean, I don't think they're going to, obviously she's a main character. They're not going to write her out, but
Right.
man, her hesitation to sign that thing, it feels like she's not yet fully committed to this. I mean, it's a big change in her life.
Yeah.
Of course, she's already signed the lease on the new place, so she's counting on that money. But yeah, I'm a little worried about her.
Yeah, definitely some trust issues happening there. And speaking of venturing out on her own, we get to see her dad again, the legendary Robert Townsend. Great to see him on TV.
Hmm.
And being just the stereotypical dad, like, oh, these walls
Yes.
are thin, and are he's trying to be supportive at first. And he's like, oh yeah, I think this is great, but I don't think he wants her to move out. I think he likes having her around. I think he enjoys her company and doesn't want her to leave, and thinks it's going too fast. And then he
Hmm.
says, I don't know what's flimsier, these walls or those partnership promises, because he's like, "Are you signed that partnership agreement yet?" And she's playing it off. Well, they're busy, and yeah, I haven't gotten around to it, or
Working out
whatever.
the details.
Yeah,
Yeah.
working out the details, whatever.
Hmm.
So I just thought that was really funny to see him kind of play that dad role
Yeah.
and
And
all
I
that.
can identify with that too. I mean, I have two grown kids. I know what it's like to be an empty nester. It always confused me. I've heard some people as their kids get older and they talk about, oh man, finally the kids are going to be gone. We're going to have all this time to ourselves and everything. I'm like the opposite. I love having my kids around. You know,
Yeah.
why would you want your kids to leave? I guess depending on if you didn't do a very good job raising them and they're not pleasant to have around. But for my kids, man, I just like having them around. So I can, when he was talking about that, I could feel that he likes, their roommate arrangement and didn't want that to end.
Yeah, yeah. Speaking of daddy-daughter scenes, the next scene that we come across in this episode is Richie and Evie and Richie and his daughter.
Hmm.
I thought that was a really great scene. If you didn't tell me that they were actors, I really would have thought that they were, you know,
Hmm.
father and daughter. The little girl that played Evie was great, and especially that line about, "Mom says you're alone," and then he says, "Alone or lonely?" and
Uh-huh.
and again, it's one of those just one-liners that is so deep with meaning and
Hmm.
emotion, and even Richie kind of realizing himself, I am alone, right?
Yeah.
And I just thought that was so great to see them interacting, and the love and concern that she has for Richie is so endearing, and it
Hmm.
enables this is the softer side of Richie that you get to see that you don't see very often.
Right. Right.
What did you think of
And
those
I
performances?
I'm always impressed with gifted child actors.
Mm,
And you know what I'm not sure of, maybe you know this, is this daughter the same one that played the daughter previously?
I believe so. I believe it was
Okay.
the same daughter from season two.
Okay. Because when they were talking about in season two, they were talking about Taylor Swift tickets and
Hmm.
that scene, I it seemed like it was a little bit stiff, her delivery, like she was just saying her lines. But in this scene where she's with Richie, that I'm with you, it seemed very real. And maybe she's, growing as an actor if it's the same person. But yeah, I love that. And they had that little, what was the thing they did at the end? It was like an inside joke that just the father and daughter thing where they're looking at each other and saying the same word. I forget what the word was though.
Oh yeah,
Um,
I don't remember what it
but
was.
it was just so real. I've got a daughter. We did goofy stuff like that, and
Yeah.
so it's very well written. Yeah.
Yeah. I like when he was walking her to her back to her house, like, what animal could you be if you could be any animal? And the
Hmm.
only thing he can spit out is like caterpillar. And I was like, he's like, no, 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 there's something else. And she's like,
Hmm.
merhorse. It's just
Yeah.
really endearing. And and one of those things where you realize that, Richie isn't a tough SOB all the time, right?
Right.
He's a father and
Mm-hmm.
raising a daughter and co-parenting and all that stuff. And
Yeah.
so I thought it was really, really neat to see that. Where Chris Store, I love how he uses actual Chicago businesses for the backdrop of some of his scenes. So
Mm-hmm.
I talked a lot about Ever Restaurant. It's basically become a character of its own in this particular season. It's mentioned a lot.
Mm-hmm.
And in this episode, we see Tina going to the farmer's market, and that's a real farmer's market called Jacobson Family Farms.
Okay.
So, I got to tell you, this show has done so much for Chicago tourism. I have a list
Mm-hmm.
of places I want to go
Mm-hmm.
whenever I get to Chicago. Ever Restaurant's one of those places, and now Jacobson Family Farms is one of those places. What do you think about the actual use of the city of Chicago as opposed to a lot of these productions go to Toronto to stand in for some of these bigger cities and to save costs and things like that. But
Mm-hmm.
they're actually using these Chicago businesses and supporting local businesses through the use of filming there and getting exposure. What do you think of them being able to use a real city like Chicago?
I hope the city is giving them some financial breaks, or some kind of incentive to do that because the city certainly is benefiting from it. I've been to Chicago once, and I'm actually going back to a podcasting conference next year, like in March.
Oh,
So
okay.
yeah, I'm definitely gonna check out some of these landmarks and the places that we see in the show. But I think it's great. It's fun for people that live in Chicago too. Like I go there every day. I walk by that building, or I've been to that
Yeah.
restaurant. It's pretty cool.
Yeah, yeah. I think it's really neat, and I look forward to visiting Chicago one day and seeing all these places where they filmed. But so this episode kind of takes a turn, and we see kind of the designated comedic relief of the Fact brothers, Neil and Ted, and
Hmm.
I'm gonna say this is the part that I'm mixed about. I like Neil Fack and I like the Fack brothers as comedic relief, and I thought they were great in season two, in those small doses. But in this episode and then the next episode that we're gonna talk about, there's a lot of Fack. I mean,
Hmm.
there's a lot of facts, and I think what they saw is they saw what worked in terms of the comedic, and we talked last week, it was kind of funny about, is this show a comedy? And I think they, seeing that they're getting some, I don't know, maybe criticism about being nominated for all these comedy categories and awards and winning them, that they're not really a comedy. So now they're kind of leaning a little bit into the comedy in this episode with the facts. I mean, the scene that
Hmm.
they were in here was kind of funny, where they had the mugshots basically of all the
Right. The
Chicago
judges, the
restaurant
reviewers.
viewers.
Yeah.
Yeah. And Neil saying, "Come in here because it's nice in here," was genuinely funny. But do you think there's too much facts, or is it enough, or what do you think? I mean,
It was
are we leaning too much into it?
I think it was okay for this episode because it wasn't the main theme of the episode. Um, but I hadn't thought about your theory about, hey, they're nominated for comedy. Maybe they need to actually throw in a lot more comedy. But I don't know. For this episode, I was fine with it. Uh, well, I had kind of a different way of looking at it with episode 5, but I mean, obviously they have great comedic timing, and
Yeah.
it's good in that regard from a technical standpoint. But someone I saw someone online wrote that in the first couple of seasons, the facts were seasoning, and now they're becoming the main course.
Yeah.
And
Yeah.
that's, I don't know, not everybody likes that. Although I've talked to some of my friends who they love it. They love that part of it. They love all the fact jokes. But
Yeah.
I don't know.
It's yeah, I agree with you there that it's this episode was just enough. It was borderlining on a
Hmm.
little too much.
Yeah.
But when we talk about episode five, I have a lot of misgivings about that one. But so we get in here, and he Neil and Ted hang up all the restaurant critics from Chicago on the wall, and Carm comes in and he has this like PTSD moment of I hate this feeling, and you
Mm.
see it flashing back to his past and where he was cooking before, um and he even acknowledges, I hate this feeling. And then I got to thinking, Carmi, you had like an Al-Anon support group that was featured in the first two seasons. Like where did they go? This is the perfect opportunity for you to go to those meetings and say, look, I'm having some trouble focusing, I'm having some trouble adjusting,
Mm-hmm.
and we just don't see them now. Like that was such a one part of seasons one was him going to these Al-Anon meetings, and what endeared him, I think, to a lot of viewers was him
Mm-hmm.
working through those issues of grief and him working through those issues of not being good enough. And now we're not seeing that at all. Um,
I
so
think he's
I'm,
in denial. Yeah.
yeah, denial,
You
or he's
know,
feeling stuck or something.
or he
I
doesn't have
don't know.
time. He quit smoking because he doesn't have time to go smoke for 5 minutes.
That's
He's got
true.
too much to do.
That's
So,
true.
I mean, that would take, going to those meetings is going to take hours. So,
Yeah.
I don't know, maybe he thinks I can just power through, like a lot of people do. I don't really need therapy.
Yeah. Yeah. So, you kind of hope in the future episodes you see him kind of realizing maybe he needs it, and we see maybe another Al-Anon meeting where he, I don't know, works through these things.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And then we cut to a scene of Ibra and the sandwich window, and poor Ibra, man, he's getting like decimated at the sandwich window.
Mm-hmm.
And we learn later on that this is the one area of the restaurant that's actually making money is the
Yeah.
sandwich window, which
Well,
is
they're not
which is
spending
funny.
much on labor, that's for sure.
Yeah, it's just poor Ibra handling everything.
Mm-hmm.
That got me thinking to a kind of a maybe bigger picture of the bear versus the beef. Is the bear gentrifying the neighborhood? Like the beef was this local spot that people could go
Mm.
and could, kind of like Cheers, where everybody knows your name. It was established that there was a lot of regulars, that a lot of blue collar people that go there, and then it got changed to the bear, and now it's this like uppity, tweezery, fine dining establishment destination restaurant with a sandwich window where now everybody's got to wait outside to get it. And I'm
Right.
thinking, man, is this gentrification? Are we witnessing that? Do you think? I mean, I don't know
Mm.
that neighborhood of Chicago all that well, but you
Yeah.
know,
I don't know. It could be. It just seems like an odd combination. You don't typically think of a Michelin star restaurant also having a walk-up sandwich window. But I mean, they're doing what they have to do to stay in business, I guess. It's like Natalie said, it's the only thing that's making money. And
yeah,
you
yeah,
know,
and it's a nod to the beef, right? It's a nod to the original restaurant a little bit.
hmm
But yes, I don't know. I mean, it got me thinking, like, is that what gentrification looks like? Is you get this new uppity kind of restaurant coming in, displacing the regulars, is essentially what
hmm
gentrification kind of is. And I was
hmm
like, I don't know, is the bear good for the neighborhood? Is the bear not good for the neighborhood? I don't know. Maybe I don't know if it'll be addressed, but it's an interesting take.
maybe we'll find out when we watch the next episodes. Maybe everybody else already knows the answer to that.
Yeah, right. Yeah, no spoilers. So,
hmm
um, yeah, so we go back and we see Richie and the daughter back at their house, and who comes walking out the door? It's Josh Hartnett, as the guest star as Frank,
hmm
as the new husband, or the new soon to be husband.
hmm
And they have this like really awkward conversation about Frank's like, I should have came to you. I apologize. And Richie's like, look, I'm not her dad, right? You do what you want to
Right.
do. And we heard about Frank in season two. He was a face unseen, and now Josh Hartnett comes in. And again, the guest stars that are coming on this show are just A-list guest stars, and it's
hmm
amazing to me who they're able to get. And Josh Hartnett comes in for this just quick little 5-minute scene, and nails the awkwardness that you feel in that conversation,
Yeah.
about having to co-parent with somebody else that's going to be fathering your kid essentially, and that's always got to be awkward.
hmm
But I just thought it was really interesting, and it solidified where, if you remember in season two, episode seven, Forks, where he calls Tiff and it's like, hey, I got 3 tickets to the Taylor Swift concert, and she has to break it to him. It's like, oh, he we're engaged. He asked me to marry him, and
hmm
you finally saw that door slam shut for Richie, where Richie, I think, kind of had a little bit of hope of maybe getting back together with
Yeah.
Tiffany, and it didn't happen.
Yeah.
Um,
And those are expensive tickets too.
oh, it's right. And
It's
the fact that he
crazy.
got three, and Jimmy
Yes.
was the connection, right? Uncle Jimmy was the connection.
hmm
I gotta wonder. I keep theorizing that Jimmy's part of the mob. I feel like Jimmy's
It's
in the mob or
implied.
something.
Right. But on the other hand, he seems like, I mean, he has his rough side for sure. And
Yeah.
just the little things that he says, he's seen some stuff. He knows some people and obviously has connections, but yet he can be such a nice guy too, you
Yeah.
know,
Great scene with Josh Hartnett.
with
It was
Frank.
great to see him on a TV show. Yeah.
Hmm. Yeah.
Yeah.
And I agree, it was very awkward. And it was the body language. He was like two steps standing higher than Richie. So he kind of had
Yeah.
an implied dominating kind of thing. And then he says, the house, yeah, no, I got it all on my own, didn't have any help.
Yeah.
And not that he was volunteering that information, but that was what was said. And, Richie wants to be such a great dad, but I don't know if you noticed, but Frank's fingernails were painted as if
Oh, I didn't see
Evie
that.
had painted. That's what daddies and daughters do. The little girl paints dad's fingernails.
Yeah.
And so, I mean, it's just another thing showing that, yeah, he's going to be a really good dad. And I don't know, Richie is kind of, okay, whatever. He wants to be a good dad too, but he's in a bad spot.
Yeah, and you hear later on, I think it was in the next episode where he's like, "Is it better that I'm just not around?" Because he knows Frank's a
Mm,
good guy, and he knows Tiff's going
yeah.
to be fine with Frank, and it's like, is
Yeah.
it just going to be better that I'm not here, or is it weird that I'm here? And
Hmm.
Sugar's like, no, it'd be weird if you weren't there, and kind of
Yeah.
reassures him, and again, it's almost like Richie's kind of trying to find his purpose again, like, and if I don't have Evie, all I've got's the bear, right? So,
Hmm. He needs
yeah, so
somebody.
yeah,
They need to connect him with somebody.
yeah,
He has
yeah,
a romantic plot line.
exactly. He's the only one I want to see get connected with somebody. So, so we come on a scene where Sid is walking out of the subway, and then the executive chef from Ever, Adam Shapiro,
Hmm.
comes out, and that's actually the actor's real name, Adam Shapiro, which I thought was kind of funny.
Hmm.
He comes out of the subway, and they're talking back and forth, and was like, "Hey, man, I happened to be in your restaurant a couple of weeks ago, and it's like, really? We didn't know. I was like, well, there's a lot of yelling back there. And it's like, but other than that, really cool vibe.
Hmm. Hmm.
And then he remarks about a scallop dish that says it felt new, like not carmy. So what do you think? What are the greater implications of that scene, do you think?
What struck me about that was, it's like her hesitation to sign the partnership agreement.
Hmm.
She, as part of that conversation with Adam, she said, "I don't even want to ask how the food was." Like,
Yeah.
where's the confidence?
Yeah.
I mean, are they putting out bad food? I don't think so. I
Yeah.
mean, Carm wouldn't let it go out if it was not good. So why doesn't she have more confidence in what they're doing? That's what occurred to me.
I think it's because there's so much dysfunction back there. I mean, there's so much
Hmm.
dysfunction between the front of house and the back of house. And we see that in the next scene where Sid and Carmi we're back in the restaurant in the middle of the day. It's not service, and they're kind of bickering back and forth like an old married couple. And
Hmm.
Sid points out Carmi's lack of communication with everybody. Back of
Right.
the house, front of house, and Carmi's quick to blame Richie. That the breakdown communications there until Sid points
Hmm.
out that, hey, you just changed everything on the menu after you had told um, Sugar to print them out, and
The
now you're
print. Yeah.
changing it.
Yeah.
So it's just I don't think he realizes how bad of a leader he is, and Sid needs to tell him, and is in her
Hmm.
own way showing him, look, if you're going to lead us, but you're not doing a great job doing that. You're just kind of yelling at
Right.
everybody. Um,
And right there in that scene, he did recognize it. I mean, he
yeah,
said, "Yeah, oh, bad communication, huh?"
yeah,
And and Sid, yeah, yeah. Now you're maybe now he's starting to get it a little bit.
yeah. And interesting that they're doing it over something kind of mundane. They're supreming oranges, and they both cut themselves on
Hmm.
doing that. Which I don't know if you've ever had to supreme oranges before, or any kind of citrus. I've done it once at home just to do it. It's not
Hmm.
fun. It is not that is not a fun job, and it's so, but to get those little pearls of citrus, you have to do it. Like beauty is pain, as they say, and that is
Mm,
not a zero fun, sir. I would not 0 out of 10. I would not recommend supreming oranges if you don't have to. So
yeah.
the next scene is kind of was really interesting. I thought it was the parenting conversation between Nat and Richie. Again, it's this dialogue that's filled with a lot more deeper meaning, right? With Nat sitting there researching the Michelin star system, and then they talk about this the the rock and the sand painting, and then she says something like the part that got me was she was trying to make sure that her crazy isn't carried into her daughter.
Mm,
And I mean, that's as parents, right? The best thing we can do today is just to make sure that our kids aren't as messed up as we are.
that's a good
And
way to put it. Yeah.
that was really, really deep to think about because,
Hmm.
especially coming from that dysfunctional family with Donna, and then the way that Sugar had to kind of be the mother of the entire Berzatto family, because the Donna was not the mother of the family. So now she's pregnant with her first child, and she's just like, I don't want that crazy to rub off on her.
Right.
We're
Yeah.
we're
I think
both,
it's a common concern, right?
yeah, yeah, we're
Um,
both parents. We have that concern,
hmm. Absolutely. And especially when it's your first one, it's like, man, I've never done this before. I'm not qualified to do this job. And it's
right?
such an important job. Why am I getting stuck with this?
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, it's a real concern and it's stress and it just adds to her stress on top of all the, handling all the dollars and numbers and everything behind the scenes.
Yeah, which makes me wonder how the restaurant's going to run without her when she has the kid and she's out on maternity
Hmm.
leave or whatever. I mean, she is. I mean, the name Sugar is so apropos. She's the sweetness that holds all the nuts together,
Hmm.
and it's just going to be interesting when she has to take off when she has the child and how the restaurant's going to function without her. So I don't know if we'll see that by the end of this season or not, but the timeline is moving at a pretty good clip. So I don't know.
Hmm.
We'll see.
Yeah.
So the episode ends kind of on a suspended note. It kind of went through this again. This was a very laid back episode, kind of leisurely, just conversations back and forth. But then we find out the Chicago Tribune is sending a photographer, and nobody knows why until they go out to the kitchen. Says, Chef Sid, why would the Tribune be sending a photographer to the restaurant? And immediately, Carmi and Sid knows they've been in this environment before. It's like because we've just been
Hmm.
reviewed,
Yeah.
and they're like, and then nobody knew that it was happening. And I mean, watching Doors, the episode Doors, just an episode ago, we see why there was so much dysfunction, so much yelling. They wouldn't have known that a critic was coming through the door because there was so much yelling and arguing back and forth.
Right.
Um, and then also it kind of negates what Neil said earlier. It's like I pre-memorized all the restaurant critics. Well, you missed one, buddy.
Yes, you
You
sure
missed one.
did. But yeah, and I mean, it goes back to the same thing. As soon as they all realize the reviewer has already been there, everyone is saddened.
Yeah.
Like they know it's going to be bad. But again, why aren't they more confident? But I guess, the review is not just going to be on how the food tastes. It's also the
Right.
atmosphere
Right.
and how well the staff get along and they know that's not going to be a good score.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah, you saw in the previous episodes there's some real quick clips of news clippings of articles that about this new restaurant, the Bear, that was opening up, and they seem to be
Mhm.
good. So, I gotta wonder if this review, because we're left hanging, we don't know what the review says either.
Right.
As viewers, you gotta wonder, do you think it's gonna be bad? I mean, you really like you were just saying, is it gonna be bad? We don't know. Like because we
Mhm.
can't confidently say it's going to be good because of all the dysfunction and the miscommunication going on between the front of the house and the back of the house, and people can, it's almost an open kitchen, people can see the Carmi yelling at everybody, so you
Yeah.
don't know if it's going to be good, you don't know if it's going to be bad. So when this review drops, whenever it drops, I think it'll be really interesting to see how it turns out and how everybody reacts to it. So
Yeah. They've been reviewed before and
yeah.
that
Yeah.
got that brought in a lot of business, more business than they could handle, it seemed like at the
Yeah, they
time.
forgot to turn off the pre-order function on the
Right,
on
right.
the thing, and it turned into we're firing 76 chickens right now. So
Yeah.
we'll see, we'll see.
Hmm.
So that brings us to episode 5, which is also directed and written by Chris Storr, titled Children. Um, the opening scene, that song, it was so I don't know. I wasn't prepared for it. Really kind of in your face opening number called Dream Little One Dream. What do you
Hmm.
know about that song?
I don't know anything about that song. I don't
So I was
even
doing so
it I you know what the funny thing is about this show, the music, I hear it, but I seem like I'm paying more attention to the visual of what's happening as opposed to the music is kind of subconscious for me.
yeah.
So I know you notice it a lot more. What was it
Yeah.
about that song?
Oh, well, the song is called Dream Little One Dream, and I was doing some research on it, and it's the main title theme of Charles Lofton's unsettling 1955 film, The Night of the Hunter, in which Robert Mitchum stalks his own stepchildren down the Ohio River after murdering their mother. And the
Really?
title of the episode is called Children, and we see the opening shot of Sugar, who's pregnant, praying in the
Hmm.
church, and I'm like, Jesus, what are
That's
we
that's pretty
doing?
dark. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, because the song was really kind of in your face and was like, "Oh, this is a weird way to start."
Hmm.
Um, and then, it just kind of opens up that way. And I was like, why would they open that up that way? And there's obviously some symbolism in that song, I guess. I don't know. We'll see.
Hmm.
And then we see Marcus trying to decide what to do with all his mom's stuff. Again, part of that grieving process. Like, what do you do?
Yeah.
Do you give it away? He doesn't want it. They sold the house or are going to sell the house, and Sid's like, just donate it. And
Donate it. Yeah. Somebody will
yeah,
want it.
yeah. And then what's interesting is, in the first season where Marcus kind of awkwardly asked Sid out on a date in the
Hmm.
middle of a rush hour service. And so he's there apologizing to her. And he's like, I'm sorry for making things weird, back then. And she's like, no, no, it's cool. But I think secretly she likes him. I think secretly Sid's in love with Marcus. I mean, he's a big sensitive guy. I mean, what's not to like about him? So
Exactly. What is not to like there? But I think that she has so much going on right now. She doesn't have any bandwidth for, a relationship, and that just would add so much more complexity to her life. But I just love how she just rolls with everything,
yeah,
no matter what comes at her, it's okay. We can handle it, and she's the calming presence. Of course, these are just two of them talking, but she made him feel comfortable, even though he was a little uncomfortable because he felt he had to apologize. And it was awkward when it happened. It
yeah,
was kind of another sort of a comedy moment there,
yeah, a little bit, a little bit.
hmm Yep.
So the overarching, I guess, thing going on in this episode is both Richie and Carmi find out that the fictional Ever restaurant, not the real Ever restaurant, people. So the fictional Ever restaurant is closing.
Hmm.
And that restaurant played such a big role in both of their lives. So they talk about um, a funeral dinner coming up. That at
Hmm.
the closing of this restaurant, and I thought it would have been a good opportunity for them to reconnect, but you see that they kind of still avoid each other. They're still kind of mad at each other. And the moment where they're in the restaurant, he's looking at the article, Richie's looking at an article about Ever, and Carmi walks in, and they don't say anything at first, and then Sugar comes in and say, hey Richie, you got a package out front. He goes, excellent, and then he
Hmm.
finds an opportunity to get up and get out.
Yeah.
Um, that I felt like that could have been a way to reconnect, but you can still see that there's some hurt between the two from the fridge meltdown.
Yeah. A month
And
earlier. Yeah.
yeah, a month earlier. And I think when Nat asked Carmi, she said, how you holding up after hearing the announcement of Ever? Uh, he tells her he feels etch a sketched. It took me a minute to understand what that meant. Like
Hmm.
he doesn't open up a lot about his feelings, but man, when he does, that was pretty visual. I was like, oh, he's shook.
That's a metaphor that,
Yeah.
yeah, very, very good one. I like that. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm gonna keep that one in my back pocket because that was great. I was like, man, for a guy that doesn't express emotions a lot, he really knocked that one out. So,
Hmm. And it
um,
had such a profound effect, that news,
yeah,
on Carm and Richie and Sydney as well. Like, if that place is closing, how can we possibly think that we could be a success here? But they didn't say that it was closing because of financial failure. Didn't
right.
they give the reason was she just decided she didn't want to do it anymore? I think
Yeah,
that's
that's
what
the
one of
phone
them said.
call. Yeah, that was the phone call between Jessica and Richie, which
Yes.
so that was the next scene. And we were
Hmm.
just talking about how we want to see Richie kind of hook up and connect with somebody. I want Jessica and Richie to get
Oh,
together
yeah, yeah.
because
They had some
Jessica,
chemistry. Yeah.
yeah, because in the Forks episode, Jessica was the one that was the expediter, and he was
Hmm.
learning the expediting routine from her. And then they had a little bit of, flirtatious glances back and forth. So
Hmm.
I'm thinking that's going to come to something. Somebody's got to have a romantic connection at some point.
Yeah.
But I really hope it's Richie and Jessica. But yeah, so the phone call between Richie and Jessica, he was like, "So what happened?" And Jessica's like, "Yeah, she just woke up one day and just decided she didn't want to do it anymore." Um, what do what do you think about that? I mean, when we just like if me and you decided we just didn't want to be podcasting anymore, it affects just really us,
Right.
right? But
Right.
when she shuts down an entire restaurant because she doesn't feel when Chef Terry just doesn't feel creatively into it anymore, that's 100 some odd people's jobs.
Yeah.
What
Yeah.
did you think about that?
It's a big thing, and I have to think she put some serious thought into it before making that decision.
Yeah,
But I what it comes to mind is, why wouldn't she sell it? Does it not have any value? It's a revenue producing asset, rather than just close it down.
right.
Or, I mean, with her standards, maybe she would think nobody's going to do it the way I do it, and I'd rather leave. Like when Seinfeld did their last episode, it was when they were at the top of the ratings. You don't want to see something go downhill. I mean, that's what she's proud of. She built that, and I can kind of see that. Plus, she probably has enough money that she doesn't really need to, go look for a job now.
Yeah.
She can just close it and, you know, do whatever she wants to in her life next. But yeah, you're right. It affects a lot of people, though.
One thing you mentioned that was interesting. You said when she was leaving and it starting to go downhill. It reminded me of that first episode of this season, where she told when Carmi pulled the steak out from the salamander and said, "5 seconds more, chef." And
Mm-hmm.
you kind of think to yourself, what's 5 seconds going to do? But in her mind, these are my recipes. You're going to cook it my way. You're not going to do any kind of variation on my theme. You're going to
Right.
cook it the way I want to do it. So it's 5 seconds always, chef. So thinking about what you were just saying is like selling it to somebody, or maybe even having an executive chef take over and keeping the name. It's no longer hers. It's no longer her recipes. It's going to be this other chef that's going to be cooking maybe the same thing, and it's not going to be as good. So that
Mm-hmm.
could be a valid reason for wanting to shut it down. It's like, look, if I'm not cooking the food, then there's no purpose for the restaurant existing.
Right.
But yeah, well, I mean, we'll see what happens, and maybe that Adam Shapiro Sid conversation comes back and has something to do with that. Who knows?
Mm-hmm.
So we get to this part of the episode that I have some mixed feelings about, because the episode takes this 180 turn and turns into this like slapstick comedy thing, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
not for sure how I feel about it, because
I'm
again we
pretty
get
sure how I feel about it.
we get another huge like guest star, and I say huge metaphorically and literally, in John
Hmm.
Cena, WWE wrestler John Cena.
And his name is John Cena!
Playing another Fack brother by the name of Sammy Fack, and you cannot convince me that he is in the same gene pool as Neil and Ted Fack. I mean,
Yeah, I
there's
agree.
there's no way. I mean, I love John Cena as an actor. I think he's very charismatic. I think he's he's
Hmm.
he's a good looking guy. He's funny. He's got good comedic timing. I don't love him here.
No.
I don't love his character in this kind of serious show. And he over kind of keeping with the metaphor of food, he's a good ingredient, but he overpowers the dish. And if you have one ingredient that overpowers the dish goes down a level.
Yeah.
And I feel like that's what happened here in this episode. This whole bit about him haunting Ted because Ted stole some SD cards went on way too long. And this the slapstick comedy, I think, was a complete tonal shift in what we were seeing so far. And I feel like they shoehorned comedic things in here because it's supposed to be a comedy, and it
Mhm.
just didn't work. So tell me your thoughts.
It did not work for me either. I think I'm with you. I like John Cena, good guy. I mean, in real life, he's a good person and he's a good actor and all of that. But I really see this as a casting error.
Mm,
And it was disappointing because everything about the bear so far has been just so good, but yet it's distracting just because of the fact that he's a famous celebrity. Like he just doesn't fit in these scenes, and the constant back and forth with Ted and Neil. I mean, they're all very good at comedy and they're perfect comedic timing, but it all just seemed very much too forced.
yes.
And you know, the quick the back and forth banter, it didn't, to me, it didn't seem like real life conversation at all. And the bear, all of the dialogue is known for being so real and
Mm,
gritty and real
hmm.
life, but all of this, constant back and forth, nobody stumbles on any words, nobody pauses, it's just immediate, and didn't seem real and didn't sit well with me at all.
Yeah, if you're able to cut a scene out and the episode is better because of it, then maybe you should have
Mm,
cut that scene out. Like
yeah.
that whole bit from basically when Richie walks in there and shows him this new stool and then Sammy comes in with the buffer. If you cut all of that out and then skip straight to when computer comes in and starts talking to him about the financials, would have been
Hmm.
just a it was still would have been a good episode. It would have been a better episode, I
A
think, without
better
it.
episode.
It
Yeah.
would have
And so it would have been 29 minutes instead of 34 minutes. So
exactly.
who cares?
And what's funny is I think back to Chef Joel McHale or the Joel McHale chef character where he says, subtract. That's the lesson I want you to learn from this. Like
Ah, yeah.
maybe the showrunner should have taken their own advice there and
Uh-huh.
subtracted a little bit. It's almost like they wanted, I don't know if he wrote this specifically with John Cena in mind, or they wanted another fact brother and a big name person to come in, but it just felt so forced,
Yeah.
and it, yeah, I just didn't think it was good, unfortunately. And when you go keep climbing that mountain, you have nowhere else to go, right?
Hmm.
You're gonna trip up at some point. We can't expect perfection every time, because I have no notes on the first two seasons of The Bear. I thought the first two seasons were great. Nothing changed, nothing about those two seasons.
Yes.
But when we get to the third one, it's almost like they saw what worked in the first two, and they're trying to turn those things up to 11, and in doing so, made the
Hmm.
show shine a little less brightly.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. It makes
so
me think of like when a little kid is at there's a bunch of family around, little kid does something funny, everybody laughs. Well, they're going to repeat that same thing 10 times because and of course everybody's going to laugh, but it's just not as funny the second time or the third time or the eighth time. It Yeah, they could have cut out so much of that and improved it. But hey, it is what it is. I still like the show.
yeah,
It's
I mean,
certainly not
yeah,
going to put me off
yeah,
watching it.
it's not going to turn me off for sure, but it is the one criticism I have. Now, with all that being
Mhm.
said, that last line about going and getting a duck, and he goes, "Oh, I saw one by the lake. Should I go get a trash bag?" Okay, that was
That was
funny.
funny. Yeah, it
That
was.
made sense in the context of what everybody was talking about, because you don't expect Sammy to understand, going and getting a duck to cook. He's like, "Oh
Right.
yeah, I'll go get a duck. Saw one by the pond." So,
Mhm.
okay, that part was funny, but everything else
Mhm.
before that was not great. So we move on to see the computer, as they call him, the family accountant and attorney. I didn't catch if I don't think they said his real name. I don't even, or his name in the show is just the computer.
Yeah.
And to show where everybody was bleeding money, they were talking about using chargers, which I thought was funny. He's like, so it's a plate that nobody eats off of, and then you still have to wash it anyway.
Mhm.
Reducing wine pours, switch to a produce vendor versus using an expensive farmer's market, open 6 days a week instead of five. It makes me wonder, like, as Carmi and Uncle Jimmy and Nat and Sid as partners, they couldn't have seen those cost saving measures on their own. They had to have somebody coming in and tell them that. Is
Right.
it? Do you think it's because they couldn't see the forest for the trees and there's all the other things that they were distracting? Because I feel like these are common sense things, right?
They do seem like common sense things. And I'm sure, well, the Orwellian butter, was it butter? Is that what the
Yeah, it was
thing was?
butter.
Yeah.
Yeah, dystopian butter.
Obviously, Uncle Jimmy's already pointed that out. And that too seems like a common sense thing. But Carmy is not thinking common sense. He's thinking star. And no matter what it takes, that's what we have to do, no matter what it costs. And um, yeah, it does seem like common sense. And I agree with you. It's probably forest for the trees. They're so involved with the day to day, just getting, let's just make sure we can get to the next minute and do what has to be done right now, as opposed to taking a step back and taking the 30,000-foot view to see where is all this money going and where could we kind of stop the hemorrhaging of money that's going out. And they're almost making it. They one more day in the week, they'd covered their expenses, but the week is too short.
Yeah, I mean, even Carmy, when Sid was telling him about you have bad communication, he and Tina comes in with the farmers market stuff. Even he realizes that changing the menu every day in this economic climate is probably not the best thing, and so he even knows. But sometimes you got to have that outside person that has no vested interest just look at you and say, hey, this isn't working. I know this is your baby, but it ain't working. But I do love at the end of it where he comes in to where Natalie's at and says, do you need a Marcus? Because he only makes 3 dishes. And and I think she spoke for us all when it says, if you fuck with Marcus, I will murder you. And I was like, that's right. Do not mess with Marcus. We will all murder you.
Leave Marcus right where he is. Because who's going to make desserts anyway? Nobody has time to take on his job. They're going to have to hire somebody. And he already knows it.
That's right.
Yeah.
That's right. And then we end the episode with a big foreshadowing of a Donna appearance. Donna's got to appear at some point in this episode. She was mentioned a few times already in earlier episodes. Pete telling Nat, find Dee Dee before Dee Dee finds you. Natalie ignores a phone call from Mom from Donna, and then finally in this episode, Carmy finds a box in the basement labeled Dee Dee and starts going through old photos. So you got to know a Donna appearance is coming. I mean, we haven't seen the rest of these episodes, but it's coming.
It would sure seem so. And he finds that, and I'm thinking, okay, what's the significance here? And then, episode's over. I guess we're not going to find out this time, right?
Right. So it's almost like these 30-minute episodes. You're at the end of it, you're like, oh, okay, what's going to happen? And then, there goes the credits.
Hang on for the next one. Yeah.
Yeah. And so before we can find out, we get to this new flashback episode called Napkins. So this episode 6 is Napkins, and it's directed by Io Edebiri, who plays Sydney. And this is her directorial debut. And man, what a great episode this was. And for her to have her directorial debut in this episode, the episode was written by Catherine Shatina. Great episode. Do you feel like it was in the right place, though? How did you feel about the placement of this episode in this season?
This episode was so good. I don't care where they place it, because it's like a break from the stress, even though it had stress of its own.
Yeah,
you're seeing Tina's backstory, and man, it's just the thing that I noticed right off the bat, the opening scene. See the clock, 6:00. And as she's getting ready and going through her morning routine, shower and put the lunch together and all that, it keeps flashing back to the alarm clock. And Tina gets showered and ready for work faster than anyone I know. I mean, it's like 20 after 6 and she's ready to walk out the door, including her shower and dressed and everything. And this episode, it immediately went to one of my top 3 for all 3 seasons, just because it was just so well done, and for other details, which we'll talk about.
Yeah, I mean, we finally get a Tina-centric episode because we had a Richie-centric episode, we had a Marcus-centric episode, we had a Sid-centric episode. So it's finally good to see Tina get her own, and you see her origin story, right? And it took me a minute when I was first watching. I was like, because her hair was different. And I was like, are we in the present? Are we in the past? What's going on? And then you realize it was 2018, which made me think, like, the way that Tina was portrayed in the first couple of seasons, especially the first season, you would have thought she worked for the Beef for like 40 years. Like she was this old grizzled veteran.
Yeah, she had her way of doing things. Yeah.
Yeah, and then you realize in this episode, oh man, it's only been like 5 years. She's it's 2018, 1921. Yeah, 5 years. So, but it was really great to see her origin story, and it was great to see her acting opposite her real life husband, David Zayas. David Zayas. So it's Lisa Colin Zayas and her husband David. So the chemistry that you see between the two as husband and wife is real because they're really husband and wife. And it starts off with her, as an office drone, and she gets laid off after 15 years and laid off like she's nothing. And then the struggles of her finding a job as a middle-aged, woman of color. And she's running into things like the young kids, the hipsters, and the rude people that are coming in. It's becoming very frustrating to her to find a job. But I thought it was great pairing her kind of realism slash kind of downtroddenness with David's just unrelenting positivity. What did you think of that first half of, before we meet Mikey, what did you think of that first half of that episode of her getting laid off, finding a job, and all that?
I could feel her frustration.
Yeah.
I mean, I've been laid off, and at this point, I consider myself unemployable because I've worked for myself for so long. But yeah, I mean, I've been in that spot where, I'm sorry, we've got to cut back. So, you don't have a job anymore. But yet again, at her age, and the fact that they just had their rent increase, so they were already going to be pretty stressed or, stretched tight for money. And now she doesn't even have a job at all. And I feel kind of bad for him at his age. That's what he does. He opens doors.
Yeah.
And I mean, nobody looks at that when they're a kid and say, I don't want to be a doorman. And yet, but he's still positive. He's always optimistic. He thinks somebody's going to get moved up and he's going to get that promotion. But she kind of sees it realistically that even if he does get the promotion, what did she say it was another $3 an hour? And that's not gonna help much. So yeah, and it was a good contrast between her as an older person and the kids that she's going in asking for a job, especially the last one where the interview that she felt really good about.
Yeah.
And she's going to go in and she's going to get this one. And the kid at the computer, he's like a 20-year-old kid with a comb over. I mean, they made him really easy to be disliked, I guess.
Yeah.
Of course, his attitude too wasn't that great.
Yeah, wouldn't even look her in the eye or anything and talk to her, talk to her like a human, which explains so much now of why she had issues with Sydney coming in episode 1, why she was so hostile to Sydney, because she kind of viewed Sydney as this young 20-year-old kid coming in and trying to change everything. And and now we see Tina back in 2018 running into, these rude hipsters at the clothing store, and then that person there at the receptionist desk saying, "Oh, it was a mistake. There's no job," and not really treating her like a human. So now she's been working at the Bear for 5 years, or the Beef for 5 years, and then Sid comes in and trying to tell her how to cook, and it's like, woman, I've been cooking for 5 years before you. And so that explains so much, and it answers a lot of questions I didn't even know I had, right? About how Tina is the way she is. And it was really great to see that. And then the episode turns where she, after that frustrating, trip to the office and the rude kid there at the receptionist desk, she goes to the Beef. And she meets Mikey for the first time, and we kind of see the Beef like in its prime, right? It's hustling, it's bustling, everybody's like calling names out, and you see the Beef in its original format, and seeing kind of the chaos and the cacophony of the sounds, and really kind of filling in that hole in the wall sandwich shop motif. And so it was kind of weird seeing the Beef as it was and the Bear as it is, and how completely opposite it is.
And I could have watched more of that, though.
Yeah.
If they would have stretched that scene out where Richie's just, talking to people, talking to customers, talking to workers, and I mean, he was in his groove. And that's just what he does all day. I could have handled, a couple more minutes of just watching that, as it played out. It was just great.
And that calls back to the first season where Richie's all over Carmen's like, we have a system and you're messing with this delicate ecosystem, and you see it in action. So it's really neat to see that payoff, right? And when you see it in the first episode, it's like, okay, well, I get what you're saying. Like Carmi's new coming in. Yeah, I'm sure he had a system, but to see the system in place, like you were saying, of these regulars coming in and Richie knowing these people by name, was really kind of cool to see. And then you see the conversation between Mikey and Tina, where after Tina gets a free coffee and a free sandwich, she sits down to eat, and finally kind of the emotion of the day and everything that's happening washes over her, and she's crying, and Mikey goes over there and comforts her, and they have this really great conversation, and they have this really heartwarming conversation. And through this conversation, you really see how big of a heart Mikey has, which makes his suicide that much more tragic.
Yes.
And man, John Bernthal just kills it as Mikey. And I want to see more Mikey, like the way he was with his family in previous episodes, where it was just him and his family and Richie talking. He's like
the
that
Bill
with
Murray
everybody.
story.
Yeah, the Bill Murray story, and the way he interacts with his family. You realize that's the way he is with everybody, right? Just sharing stories and talking about, like, the story of him going to a school field trip to a fancy office building and realizing that he's not destined for greatness, right? And identifying with Tina in that way. What did you think of John Bernthal's performance and their conversation back and forth?
He's an amazing actor, and her conversation with Mikey, it just blew me away. Me personally, I love having a deep conversation with someone that I don't really know. This is what I do on my podcast. I'm often, the guest will come on, they're telling me this tragic, traumatic, and very vulnerable story. The guest is often crying, and I don't know why it is. I just thrive on that type of interaction. And then here's Tina and Mikey spilling their guts to each other about their problems. And that's why I say that particular scene, Donna in the kitchen making dinner in Fishes, and Richie delivering the surprise pizza dish to customers in Forks. And now this conversation in episode 6 with Tina and Mikey. It's right up there. Just amazing.
Yeah. So this obviously, with the type of podcast you had, probably resonated with you the most. Just this one particular scene is exactly what your podcast, What Was That Like, all about. It's just people sharing stories and talking at a deeper level, like with when Tina was saying, I don't need to be inspired, I don't need to be impassioned, I don't need to make magic, I just want to feed my kid. Like, who can identify with that, right? And
exactly,
when she kind of realizes, like, this American dream that is perpetuated is not going to be for me. I just want to survive, and I just want to feed my kid. And Mikey obviously could identify with that, and offers her a job, right?
Yeah, and that's the thing, when she was across the street and she looked across the street and saw the sign, the beef, you knew exactly where this was going to go.
Sure.
We knew how it was going to play out, but that didn't spoil anything, though,
Yeah.
because we didn't know exactly how it was going to happen, and the way it happened wouldn't change a thing. There were no facts involved in the scene, so it was absolutely just perfect, I thought.
Yeah, this was destiny, right? It was destiny for Tina to work at the Beef and now at the Bear, and just like you said, you knew how it was going to happen, but watching the journey of her getting there, of her having to go through the struggles that she did to come to the place where she would meet Mikey and love him and love his family and love Carmi, coming in and taking over the restaurant. Just it makes her character so much more fully rounded and so much more deep than just the grizzled veteran that doesn't like change, right? So it was such a great episode, and what a directorial debut from Iowa Dabiri. After watching this, she's going to have her pick of projects, both in front of and behind the camera, especially in that very important scene of when she decided this is where I'm gonna call home at the beef. Yeah.
And
So at the
the relief on her face after that conversation, nothing better than that. I mean, you want it so bad for her that she's doing everything she can to try to just help out and contribute to the family and have a purpose, have something to do each day, and have a routine. And for her to get that, nothing better.
Yep. And then she gets home and her husband's like, "So how'd the interview go?" "Oh, it went great." And then she pulls out the beef T-shirt out of her purse and smiles, and then we're back home, right? So we'll see. We'll see what episodes 7 and 8 bring, and how this all kind of ties together. So a little bump in the road for these 3 episodes. I thought 4 and 5 were a little rough, 5 more so than 4, but then just an awesome episode 6. Really looking forward to seeing how we land the plane here in the back half of the season. Couple of stray observations I had. You know how in the first couple of episodes, forks were a main kind of theme. You saw forks everywhere. I'm starting to sense clocks are important in this one because I'm seeing clocks in every episode, and it's almost like this visual reminder of there's never enough time and it's always running out. So I'm wondering, like, where's this going to lead? What's this symbolism of the clock? So, we'll see about that. Do you feel like there's any forward momentum in this season? Like the first season, you saw Carmy coming in and trying to just survive and make the bear better. And then the second season is, okay, we turned it into, or the beef and trying to make it better. And then we turned it into the bear and the struggles of opening up the bear. And then it ends with friends and family opening night. Now I feel like, do you feel like there's forward momentum, or do we feel kind of we're running in place with this third season?
A little bit. I mean, as far as the restaurant, yeah, but I think the characters are progressing, individually, maybe. Sid has her own place now. And one scene that really kind of stuck out to me in episode 5 is when, Tina, short on produce, what are you going to put together? And she makes a dish with Brussels sprouts and cauliflower.
Yep.
And I love that because those are 2 of my favorites. I'm vegan, and Brussels sprouts are my favorite vegetable by far. And so she puts together this dish, but what she makes, she puts them on the dish and puts the sauce on top. It's kind of like what you'd get at Applebee's or one of those kind of restaurants. But then Sid can replate and put the sauce on the bottom, and it elevates the dish. And I see that as part of Tina's journey from, just being a line cook. Now she's a sous, and she's becoming much more of a proficient chef. And ironically, it's Sydney that's helping her along in that journey. So yeah, I saw that. But yeah, we ended again with some stress. We don't know how they're going to get the duck, and we don't know what the review is going to be like. But I loved episode 6 with Tina was just a little bit of stress relief because we get to fall in love with her again.
Yeah, I thought so too. I thought it was great. I didn't plan for these episodes obviously to be this way, but I'm really glad that we're covering it the way we did, because if I'd ended it at episode 5 and we didn't have 6 yet, I would have been really upset, because like 4 and 5 were kind of a letdown for me. But seeing episode 6, I see, okay, this is what the TV show is about the growth of these characters and how they face adversity and how they grow through this restaurant. And that's what I want to see. So I'm hoping in these back half of the episodes that, we got our fill of facts. Fine, sprinkle them in for some comedic effect, but I hope I hope that's the last we see of Sammy Fack.
And his name is John C.
And we get back to the core issues of trust, of is perfection really worth it, and getting this family back together as a functional unit and watching them succeed, not just as a family, but as a restaurant as well. So, any parting thoughts? Any last things did we miss anything?
That's part of the fun in a show like this. You got to have conflict. There's got to be some resolution, and we don't know for sure if it's going to have a happy ending this season or not. But that's part of the fun, the anticipation, not really knowing. One thing I came across, a little bit of bear trivia that maybe you're already aware of this, but maybe some of the listeners aren't. Carmi's tattoos. For each episode, the makeup artists have to cover up 5 of Jeremy Allen White's real life tattoos.
Oh, wow.
And they have to put on 11 Carmen tattoos and 5 scars. Now, I haven't really noticed, we know the scar on his hand, on his palm, but I haven't really noticed other scars, but they do that for every episode. And in season 1, that whole process took about 90 minutes ahead of filming.
Wow.
And now they do it in less than 30 minutes.
Wow.
So the makeup people are becoming more proficient at all those tattoos.
getting to be pros at this. Yeah. Yeah, that burn on his hand. He just told the story to Claire's like, yeah, I just burned it on a pot. Now there's more to that story. I guarantee it, because the way he looks at it and the way he rubs it like he's remembering something. So I'm maybe they'll explain it later on. I don't know, but there's definitely more to that story.
I think they focused on that in too many shots that it has to be. We have to get the whole story behind that.
Yep. Well, great. I think we did it. I think we covered those 3. So just a couple of program reminders. Next week, we're taking a break from recapping the Bears. Scott, you are going on a well-earned vacation. So we are skipping a week, but not to worry. I'm going to have a special episode of Eat Your Content to fill that gap. And then we'll pick up recapping episodes 7 and 8 on one recap, and then 9 and 10 thereafter. So we'll pick it up in a couple of weeks. Scott, where can people find you online? Where can they find your podcast if they're listening to this for the first time?
Yeah, my show is called What Was That Like? And each episode's a conversation with someone who's been through something extremely unusual, like getting bitten by a rattlesnake or dodging a derailing train, or, lots of crazy stuff like that. It's the first person story. The person actually went through it. They're telling the details of what happened. And you can find it on any podcast app if you just search for What Was That Like, or you can go to the website, whatwasthatlike.com.
Awesome. And if somebody has a traumatic, unusual story, they can go to your website, fill out a form, right? And get connected with you.
Sure.
Awesome. So again, follow me on socials at Eat Your Content, at Rich Herrera, on Instagram, TikTok, Facebook, and all those social media sites. And then make sure to follow on your podcast player of choice, so you know when we pick up these recaps again. Scott, it was an honor and a pleasure. Thank you again for joining me on the pod, and we'll see you in a couple weeks. Have fun in your vacation.
Thank you. See you next time.